Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and I have spent the last 24 years as both the CEO of Technology Partners and as the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. I'm excited to have Theresa Carrington on the show today. Theresa is the CEO and founder of 10 by 3. So, Theresa, I cannot even tell you how excited I am about this conversation today. I think you and I don't know if you remember who connected us years and years ago.
Was it Karen Hoffman?
Nope. It was Risa Bridges.
No way.
Yes.
That's right. How could I have forgotten that?
And Kevin, Risa's husband,
right.
worked for us. He retired from us. He worked for us for 19 years. Greg and I knew him and Risa back in our McDonnell Douglas days. And she connected us and said, Lisa, you are going to love this lady and what she's doing. And I don't even know how many years ago that was. But yeah, we have Risa to thank.
What a great human being both of them are. Risa played a huge role in our organization in the early days as we were just two people and a team of volunteers. And of course, today we're far from that, but it's thanks to dedication to people like Risa. And how blessed am I? I'm so glad you reminded me of how we met. It just feels like when we spend time together, I kind of call it like an old shoe, like it feels like we've always known each other, but you're right. It had to start somewhere. And I'm glad you brought that back to my attention.
An important point of that, Theresa, is when you connect people, it matters. And she said, hey, come into my tribe and meet my friend. And then consequently, we've been friends. And now, here you are as my esteemed guest today. And I'm so excited.
I know, how thrilled.
And I was thinking about it, Theresa, and seriously, I could just sit here and not say anything because you're a TED Talk speaker and I could just let you go. But I do have a few questions for you. So I think it's really important for our listeners to understand a little bit about how you grew up, because I believe, our experiences really do come to play in, what we end up doing later. And so I know that, you've kind of come full circle with that. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, I grew up below the poverty line, living on a small farm in South Central Kansas. And I like to tell people, if we didn't grow it or kill it, we didn't eat it. And we were basically subsistence farmers. And I was one of 5 adopted kids. I was adopted when I was 8. All of us came as adopted kids, not babies. There's a big difference when you're adopted as a baby versus when you're adopted as, a young person. That's a big deal. And that meant it was a merry band of misfits growing up with them and in this menagerie called a farm. I mean, it was a very hard life. It was hard working. However, it was one where the skills and talents that I learned on that farm taught me a work ethic that I carry today. Growing up poor taught me frugality, and has come in very handy throughout life, of course. And it also taught me resourcefulness. being resourceful to make something happen. I mean, I would joke, but it wasn't so far from a joke that our cars that we rattled around in were held together with baling wire and bubble gum, you know? So you were just resourceful growing up on a farm. You were taught a wide array of skills. And my mom raised us primarily as a single parent. She was an art teacher, is still an artist today. I'm thankful to say that she's still with us. So being brought up on that farm in South Central Kansas just absolutely shaped who I am and shaped what I would become.
Well, kudos to your mom, to your parents, really for reaching out and adopting 5 of you. You know, they put you on a trajectory that changed your life, you know, and you may not be who you are today. You wouldn't be who you are today if that had not happened.
No,
You know, and I wanna talk about how that plays into what you're doing today, but before we get into that, I know that you were a journalist, you were in television, radio, you that's where you started your career, right?
I did. I started my career there. I thought I would also just add one little piece that's an important component about how I grew up and where I grew up on this farm. And then I'm going to get to the journalism piece because it all kind of ties in together. The one thing that people who know me know is I also grew up with all these crazy animals around me. I grew up with a pet skunk, a pet raccoon, we had a pet crow. I mean, there were pet pigs, there were ferrets, there were geese, there were pheasants, there were horses, there were donkeys, there were cows, there were sheep, there were goats. That was the farm. Like it was a small zoo. So don't just picture, oh, I just have a little field over here and that's what I do. No, no, no. It was a small zoo. People knew about it. We would have strangers visit from just out of nowhere. And so just the management, managing all of that took all 5 of us kids, which then led to that work ethic. And I watched my mom from this farm tell stories because being on the farm. And so even at a young age, people who knew me in the small town, they'll tell you that I could tell a story. And so it wasn't long before when I reached high school, I was a very good student and I got hired as a reporter for a small town newspaper, a weekly newspaper.
Mhm.
I was only 14 years old at the time, and I was their sports reporter. And I noted that they had not been giving any coverage to women's sports, our varsity girls basketball team, as an example. And of course, that would soon change. So I became this fierce little reporter running up and down the sidelines of the football games and the basketball games. Because by then I'd realized, even though I was somehow athletic, I was too short to do most sports. So
Right.
it wasn't going to pan out for me. So I better just talk about them. So that really instilled a journalism bug in me. I like the
Mhm.
excitement of being on the sidelines and, sort of down where the action was. I got very good at photography and I was making a whole 25 bucks a month doing this reporting for this hometown paper. And I must have been taking too much of the coach's time asking him all these questions. And he said, "Hey, how much do you get paid for this?" And I told him 25 bucks a month. And I was about 16 at the time. And he said, "How many hours a week do you work on this?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, probably 30 or 40." While I was going to school. And he said, "You need to have a conversation with your boss." And so I went
Uh-huh.
in and I asked for a raise. That was my first big moment of asking for a
Your big
raise. First
negotiation.
big negotiation. Here I was, this young green journalist. I'd been doing this for 2 years. I was going to go and ask for a raise, $25 a month. I wanted $50 a month. And the boss, she's standing there. She goes, "Oh, that's really very interesting. Really, $50 a month. Okay. And how many articles do you write?" She wrote me a check for $17.50 and she kicked me out. She said, "You're fired."
Oh my goodness!
My first experience of standing up for myself and asking for a raise in the industry, but the bug had bitten. I
Mhm.
was not gonna let that moment stop me. So I started with a radio station as an intern in college, and one thing led to another, and pretty soon I found myself working in television, and I'm still only 18 years old, and I don't have a lick of college in me, maybe a semester enough just to qualify me for an internship.
Mhm.
And I volunteered my time at the local TV station, KWCH in Wichita, Kansas. And my news director called me over one day and he said, "Oh, you're making me feel guilty." I said, What did I do? Like, I'll empty the trash. I was there as a volunteer because I just wanted to
You
work
just
with
wanted to
this
be
so
around it.
badly.
Right. Mhm.
And he pulled out his wallet, gave me $100 bill, and he says, "You're working harder than any of the people I pay." He said, "The first opening I've got here, you'll have it." And
Oh.
I became an assignment editor. And so It all came from that farm, right? Because you learn those work ethics, you learn that stick to itiveness. That was my first job in television. And from there, that led to a 20-year career in television. And I would go on to win 13 Emmy Awards, Mid America Emmy Awards, and just became really, really good at my job. I now use that skills in what I do today. So that's a little bit about my story of being in television and radio.
So much packed in there, Teresa. So first of all, being on the farm, and having the zoo, you probably did. You could tell stories like none other, what the goat did or what the ferret did or, and telling these stories. And then secondly, you went in and tried to negotiate for yourself. You stood up for yourself and you got booted out. Now, a lot of people would be like, whoop, not doing that again. I mean, that would deter them from stepping out, but, it didn't deter you. I mean, so there was that resilience in there, that grit, whatever you wanna call it, that said, "No, you know what? Just because you had one bad thing happen doesn't mean there's gonna be a reoccurrence of that," and I think sometimes people get in that trap of thinking, "Well, I'm never gonna try that again because that did not go well." It doesn't mean that your future things are not gonna go well. So there's so many lessons just packed into what you just said. But let's talk about this. You did get married at some point, right? And you have 2 children. In 2002, you have what I call a life interruption.
Yeah, great name for it.
We all have them,
Yep.
and probably some of us have had multiple ones.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to tell our listeners your life interruption story, and then that will segue into some other things I wanna talk about.
Life brought me to exactly where you said. I'm now early 20s. I'm working full time at a television station in St. Louis, Missouri, KMOV here in St. Louis, and doing really well at my job. Was an investigative producer by this time, and I was the one in charge of all the sweeps pieces and doing all of those things that bring in the ratings, basically. And it was February 14th. It was on a Sunday. And my husband at the time gave me 2 dozen roses, a beautiful card, and it was a beautiful day and wanted to go to the boat show in St. Louis. And I said, well, I don't really want to go, but if you want to go, just go. He said, is it all right with you if I go? Because I know you don't want to go, but can I go? I was like, absolutely, just go. We'd been married about 13 years at that point. And he never came home. This was back in the early days of the internet, but he had met a woman in a chat room and they had turned that into a physical event and he was having an affair. And it just,
Crushed you.
yeah, I'm not wired in that way. Absolute blindside. And if you had asked me if I could have thought, I just couldn't. I absolutely did not see it coming. And so that untangled all of the, horrible things that would then continue to happen. And suddenly now a 2 household income goes down to a 1 household income. And I'm trying to hold my home together, keep my children in the same school district.
How old were the kids at the time, Teresa?
5 and 7. Yeah, I hung on to a house that I shouldn't have, and I look back and that is a regret that I have. I kept saying, "I just don't want the children to have to lose their rooms, I don't wanna have to lose their neighborhood, I don't want." That was a home that was purchased with a two-income family, and we were not that anymore. Affording that house every month, even though I had a good job at KMOV, it was a good job, it still was not enough to make ends meet. I had too many bills at the end of the month because it had been built on a two-income family.
Right.
So money became incredibly tight. But there was something in the way that others were watching and witnessing me handle what was happening to me that inspired them. And you would have to find them and ask them exactly what it was.
Do you know? I
I
mean,
would guess from the cards and letters that I received, it was an admiration to do the right thing. It was a understanding that this was not something that I asked for, or I don't know how to put it. It was an interruption that befell me. And I think people recognized the situation for what it was, and they just seemed to be incredibly sympathetic for what I was going through and how hard it was, how I just did not see it coming. It was just such an interruption, as you've put it. So the cards and letters began to pour in, and they were, you can do this, you've got this, you're strong, you're this, you're that. And they came out of nowhere. People I barely even knew, a lot of people from my church that I didn't know well. I remember one moment where We're standing up in church, the little tiny church over in Staunton, Illinois, doing the, okay, turn and greet your neighbor. And I turn and greet my neighbor. And there's an elderly woman who always stood behind me. She could not carry tune in a bucket, but she was always behind me in church. And I turn around to shake her hand, and I can feel there's money in the middle of our hands now. And she just, with the saddest eyes, wise eyes, she says, I'm so sorry. I can't do more. As we sat back down, I discreetly looked at what was in my hand, and it was three $1 bills.
Oh, Theresa.
You want to talk about how biblical that moment was, to, from the least of these that was giving what she had to help me, because she was just so pained watching what I was going through. And, that took my breath away. And I realized that I had a choice of how I was going to survive what I was going through, and that I owed her and everyone else who had ever written a card, who had made a call, who had come and left groceries in the night that remained anonymous, the anonymous money that would show up in my mailbox, the group of people from KMOV, names you would know, Ray Preston among them, reporters that are still active today, came to my house in Staunton, Illinois for a maintenance day. They painted, they scraped, we had a party, they mowed my lawn. It was amazing because they knew what I was going through. So for reasons that are still a bit mystifying to me, angels came from everywhere. They came in cards, they came in letters, they came in person by person. At some point, I had so many cards. I had been putting them out and around on like a fireplace mantle. And I thought, well, I can't keep, they're taking over the room. So I gathered them all up and I tossed them into a basket. One of those same team members from KMOV had given me, Jody Klebb was her name. And what I wouldn't realize is, in that moment, what became known then for the next 15 years as the Blessing Basket Project was born.
Mhm.
And it was this idea that a vessel can hold things that represent blessings to you and are important to you in your life. And on the really hard days, I started going through those cards and letters at the evening times when I didn't feel like I could get to the next day. I mean, I was thinking thoughts, Lisa, like, maybe my mom can raise my kids. But then I'd reread a card. You can do it. You've got this. You're amazing. And if you ask those people today, they wouldn't even remember writing the card, Lisa.
But you
And for
remember.
me, it was everything. And so I just said one day, I cannot ever pay these people back for what they've done, but I can pay it forward. And so the organization that I know we'll get to here shortly, that I now run today, is me just paying forward what others have done for me in my life. From the moment I came onto this life, we didn't talk about this, but I'll mention it briefly. Why was I an adopted kid? When I was born, my mom was in prison. And so the minute I was born, I was taken into state custody. And I'm the product of a prostitute encounter. So from the moment I came onto this planet, people have made sure that I was okay.
Mhm.
And what, are you going to just take like that your whole life? You can't. So what I do now every day is just paying forward what people have done for me in my life, to honor them and to honor their legacy. And many of them don't even remember how critical those moments were in time, but they were everything to me.
I absolutely love everything about that story. I think about the cards that people have written, and sometimes, you know what? I think it's the small things. And I always say your words matter.
They do.
Doing a card, I mean, you don't know what that's going to do for that person. Everybody coming to your house from KMOV. I
Mhm.
mean, we talk about loving people. That's love in
That's
action.
right.
Love is an action. It is a verb. It is not just a word that we say, right? So
Right.
they were showing you their love for you and their care for you by their actions.
That's it. Exactly.
But we need to take a quick break and then we'll be right back with Theresa Carrington.
We at Technology Partners understand the difficulty to find work that is engaging, yields high pay, and facilitates a work-life balance. Over the past 25 years, we have enhanced the IT teams of over 244 client companies and placed more than 3,000 IT professionals with them on short-term or permanent basis. Our staff includes over 300 experienced IT professionals, so if you're looking to take the next step in your career, visit jobs.technologypartners.net, apply for a job, and one of our expert recruiters will be happy to connect with you.
So, Theresa, I had just written down, it's like there's seasons, but there's also seasons in our life. And sometimes there's times of darkness and gloom. But if you will just hang on, the sun will shine again. And I think about your story, and you were in this season of darkness and gloom. It was a dark place. And I'm sure you really didn't know if the sun would shine again, but here's the thing I've learned as I've gotten older. The dark times are not fun, but let's not waste them because there's learnings, there's things that we can learn in those dark times that we may never learn in the sunshine.
Oh, that's so wise. Really wise thinking on your part, Lisa, for sure.
So let's move out of the darkness and let's move into the sunshine of what was placed in your heart and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So those cards and letters of support that we talked about, they were like little breadcrumbs just leading me out of a very, very dark place. So for that, I am super grateful. And on the cards and letters that put me back together and would launch what today is known as 10 by 3, never underestimate your touch on another person's life. We just don't know the impact that we have, both positive or negative, in somebody's life. So, as these cards and letters are that sunshine that you've talked about, they were just these little bright lights, and I'd follow them, read them, and slowly I got put back together again and made the decision that I'm going to do something. I'm not going to just have this not matter. What these people did needs to matter. This pain that I went through, this horrible, horrible pain, it needs to matter. And while growing up on the farm was a place where we learned to work super hard, there was a lot of really dark things that happened on that farm. And so it was time that it all mattered. And all of that fire that I was going through, all of that darkness that I was going through, it was uniquely shaping and molding and creating me into something that I was intended to be. And the same thing is happening for you right now. Whatever you're going through right now, if it's the hard stuff, if this the dark stuff, you are being molded. You are being given skills and gifts and talents that you didn't know you needed, but you're going to need them. And so I draw upon all of that today to run 10 by 3, which formerly was the Blessing Basket Project. And what we do is work with artisans all over the world and pay them what is known as a prosperity wage for their goods. And remember that hardworking farm that we talked about and the work ethic that it taught me as part of our model today. Every artisan we work with is required to use that extra money, that prosperity wage, to start 3 independent streams of income. And Lisa, when we first started making that a requirement, we were just blasted by academics saying, how can you take a poor person and they're struggling to stay alive and tell them they got to start 3 businesses? Well, you know what? Because we don't want them to be poor for the rest of their life. This is not a workforce that we're putting together just to make a product and that's it. We want to get them fully, sustainably independent. So everything that you might be going through right now, whether you're in the light of times, as we've already talked about, or maybe you're in a dark time, but just know that you are uniquely equipped. And if I had not, in my case, grown up on that farm, learned that work ethic, learned, how to hold those cars together with bubble gum and baling wire to teach me to be innovative, you can't be raised with a pet skunk and not see the world differently. I needed to bring new and different approaches to this age-old issue of poverty. Now, if you had asked me in the middle of all of those dark spaces, are you building a skill? No, it sure didn't feel like that. It felt like your whole life was falling apart. Or told me, oh, this will lead to a whole new life for you. You're going to travel around the world. You're going to have dinner with kings and you're going to, meet African chiefs and become a queen mother. I would have just said, oh yeah, have something illegal in your system. But it goes to show you that the dark times, just remember you are being uniquely equipped for something and you just have to be brave enough to embrace that. The easy answer would have been for me to crawl under the covers and stay there.
Right.
But I made a different decision and I just said, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm in charge of that.
So you started with these gorgeous baskets, and I told you that my EA, my executive assistant, she texted me yesterday and said, "Hey, I'm bringing your mail to you." I'm like, "Oh, great. I'll see you in a few minutes." And she walks into my house with this, I've got a prop here,
Oh, look at
with
that
this
one.
beautiful basket. I just about about jumped
Oh,
out of
how so
my
cool.
shoes. I was so excited. It's beautiful. I'd love for you just to tell our listeners just a little bit about even connecting to the artisan, because I know that you've won awards for this. It was kind of a unique thing that you did there.
What we do is find artisans living in extreme poverty, pay them more than anybody in the world for their goods. In exchange for that, being in our program, they also have to start 3 independent streams of income. And together, in about 3 years' time, as we sell their products throughout the United States and Canada, that generates enough revenue in their life that in about 3 years' time, they can sustainably exit from poverty. So we've had about 8,000 people do this already. And what makes these baskets special? Why are they special? Well, first of all, they're incredible works of art. They're heritage crafts coming from all points around Africa and Asia in developing economies. But as you mentioned, we're also powered by really strong technology that was developed in partnership with our technology partner, Centec. And what this technology does is it allows us to put the very face of the very artisan on the very product that they made. And when we tell you that Insoa, in your case, made that basket, he is the exact person who made that basket. Like the minute that they release the basket to us, an identity tag is put onto it, and that identity tag is attached directly to the artisan. And as the basket moves around the world to get its way to here and to get its way out to that store, that identity follows it. And so we took the idea just a little bit further. So if we had just been dealing maybe in one country with a few artisans, the idea of putting the face of the exact artisan on the basket might not be such a big deal because of scale.
Right.
But we're talking about 6 countries and thousands of artisans and tens of thousands of products. So it is a big deal to be able to put the very face of the very artisan on their very basket. And not only that, on a growing number of our products, you'll also actually see their signature, which is so important. We used to put the signature inside the basket, but we've now, using technology, figured out a way to actually associate it with their photograph and put it directly onto the card. And this process of gathering signatures from our artisans brought into sharp focus how many of our artisans had never been to school, could not read, could not write. One of the reasons we started this signature project is we noticed that some of the products coming in would just have a check mark or a line or a scribble. And I was like, what kind of signature is that? They're not even really signing it. And how do I even know that that's really their signature? And when we leaned in, we realized we were actually causing an issue for the artisans. So let's just say that they presented 10 baskets. Well, we made them sign their name on every single basket, but yet if they didn't know how to sign their name, it became this very embarrassing moment for them that we did not intend to create, of course. So they would have someone else sign for them. Well, when we figured all of this out and we figured out a way to have technology take care of that, we had to take care of that. So one by one, artisan by artisan, gave each woman an example of her name in large type. And then in cases where they had never written their name before, which was the vast majority of the cases, we would carefully guide their hand to make the letters. I have seen women break down and cry, burst into dancing, so ecstatic that after a lifetime of never knowing how to write their name, they have now written their name. There's a very moving video on our website at 10by3.org/good. It's dedicated to this, how we go about collecting this signature. And if you're listening to this podcast, you've got something so powerful within you, which is your signature that many people in the world don't have. Just know the power of what you already possess. Think about every important thing that's ever happened in your life, a marriage, a child, a car, a mortgage, etc. It all happened with your signature. But if you don't know how to write your name, you can't enter into society. So we're changing that for thousands of people.
Right. Well, and I can't wait. I told you I haven't had time to connect it to the website yet, but I can go and read about my artisan, and
Yep.
I love that so much. So when we're born, if you think about your tombstone, I was born in 64, and then it's dash, and then the day that you die, is on the other side. And you say something that I think is so beautiful. You say, what are you going to do with your dash?
Hmm.
So I think you've just done something really beautiful with your dash, and I'm just so excited to be on this journey with you here. But I have to ask you, sometimes we can kind of get weary in well doing.
Hmm.
Jeff Henderson was on the podcast, and he says one of the best things you can do for your your organization is to bring the best version of you, an inspired version of you. But the challenge is staying inspired.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to our listeners? How does Theresa Carrington stay inspired?
Well, I have an easy way to stay inspired that not everybody has access to, but that is our artisans. I cannot walk into the doors of my building and not see their beautiful artwork, not see their faces going out on every single product, every single product. It's just a part of what we do here. And every day it re-humbles you. It's like, yeah, I'm looking at a card in my hand by a NAFO. Her signature looks like it was created by a child. But I know that by creating a space at the table of humanity for a NAFO, we're going to make life better for her. She's got all the skills she needs. She just needs a place at the table. So that's all we're doing. So it's easy to stay inspired when you walk in to the building every day. And you also have this incredible team that I have that's here and doing what they do every day. So it's easy because of the faces and the product that we have. Now, there are days that it gets hard. And in those days, I take a deep breath and I just say to myself, what is in the best interest of the artisans? And it's that mantra that guides me. What is in their best interest? Do I need to take a day and just restore myself so that I can be the best for them? What is in their best interest right now? So when I get those days where I'm just, why am I doing this? I just have to take a deep breath and I say, okay, what is in their best interest? I'm here, I'm serving them. What do they need for me to be doing right now? And it helps bring clarity. So just this mantra to remind me every day helps ground me.
I love that. Teresa, people may not realize kind of where we are with poverty. Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind. The outcome that we want is to end poverty.
Mhm.
And I feel like we were making some strides to that. I mean, we still got a lot of work to do, but where are we right now? And what do our listeners need to know about poverty?
Well, you need to know that poverty is in every community where you are, that it lives in the shadows, that it is on country roads of the names that might not be on a map. The last mile of poverty, as I call it, is in the countrysides. It is in the countrysides of sub-Saharan Africa. It's in the countrysides here in our own country. However, there are two things to know. One, ending poverty is the number one sustainability goal. There are 195 countries in the world, and they all agree that ending poverty is necessary for the continuation of the human race. So, this is something that affects all of us. And when we can end poverty, we end so many of the other ills that face humanity. Where are we today with the statistics? Well, we got them down to just under two digits. So they were at about 9%. And that was after a 25-year decline. So we'd had a lot of progress, a lot of people doing amazing work, our organization included, for what little micron we contributed. But we got a lot of people out of poverty. But together, as a society, as a human race, we got poverty down over 25 years. But as of October of last year, for the first time in 25 years, poverty rates are now back on the rise. And now is not the time, as you've well put it, Lisa, do not grow weary in well doing. We have a journey ahead of us, and make no mistake, when we can end poverty, we can end malnutrition, we can end hunger, we can end a lack of education, we can end, issues with equity, issues with human rights, because you can't rule a people if they are no longer in poverty. You can't crush them down, right? So many of the issues that we face as a human race are answered by one single answer, which is an end to poverty. So poverty affects us all. It's the first time that it's on the rise. As I said, in 25 years, we've got work to do, but it can be done. Every single person has a role to play.
Yeah. So this is called something extra. What is the something extra, Teresa, that you believe every leader needs?
For me, it's compassion. Every leader needs to be compassionate. And it's compassion in the most difficult of situations. So as leaders, we face all kinds of personnel issues, all kinds of very, very difficult decisions. And in my case, I am able to use that mantra, that compassionate mantra of what is in the best interest of the artisans. And then that makes my decisions really, really clear, because that question comes from a place of compassion. I care about this higher purpose that we have of what is in the best interest of our artisans. And that question alone, like I said, it's surrounded by compassion. So I think we all have to be compassionate leaders, and having this mantra helps keep me grounded in that way.
That's great. So, Theresa, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about something. I kind of think I know what you're going to talk about, but I want to give you the opportunity. And how can our listeners get involved?
Well, they can immediately go to our website, which is probably no surprise. So that is 10 by 3, TENBYTHREE.org. Go there and just start pouring through the website. If you want to know a little bit more about us, 10by3.org/good, and you'll learn more about what we do. To very briefly tell you, why did we change our name between Blessing Basket Project, which is what we were known for 15 years because of those cards and letters that came in, to 10 by 3. That is the formula we pioneered that ends poverty. And it means that we will buy 10 of these amazing products like the one that Jenny bought for you, 10 of them a month from the artisan at Prosperity Wages, empowers them to start 3 streams of income outside their weaving. And it's those 3 streams of income, animals, crops, cows, that sort of thing, that will generate the revenue they need to support their family in a sustainable way. So 10 by 3, sustainable formula that ends poverty.
Yeah, I think you have a patent pending on that, don't you, Theresa?
There are sections of our model that we do have a patent pending on, correct. Hopefully we will get it. And it's about the way that we have people enter our program, because we don't just take everybody. If you're something to everybody, you're nothing to everybody. So we make sure that we screen our artisans really well. And what we're looking for is the poorest, most entrepreneurial people within a population. And that part of our model is what we're attempting to patent. Not because we want to protect it and sell it, but because we don't want it adulterated, and we want to then turn it around and start to give it to every organization who is fighting this issue of poverty.
Well, Theresa, I seriously think that we could go on for hours and hours. I know we could.
I know we could. I'm having so much fun.
But we need to sign off here. But I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your own personal story. And then I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. Godspeed to you, my sister.
Thank you so much, Lisa. As I was telling you and your team, what you do here with the Something Extra podcast, it matters. You know, it's hard for me to take a moment to do the promotion and the publicity that it takes for people to know our name. And what you've done here today, giving me the opportunity to speak into this microphone and share with you, not only it warms my heart just to see you, but just know that this matters. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc., 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.